Hello and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is September 9th, 2021. We've got a great call for you today, as always. Here is our agenda. We've got latest updates on SharePoint Framework, patterns and practices, updates across the program, new community samples, our optional picture time, and then 3 great demos from Yannick, Fabio, and Andrew, building an advanced image gallery experience with SharePoint Framework, a Hyperscript Tagged Markup templating, and modernize your SharePoint Framework projects. Excited to see all 3 of those. As we get going here, always looking to let folks know how to get more involved, how to participate in these calls and the program. First off, always encourage folks to demo your stuff. You're doing great work for your companies and your customers. And where appropriate, of course, make sure it's okay to demo the work, but would love to have you on the call to demo your web parts, application customizers, new Viva Connections work, anything you might be doing related to client-side development, SharePoint Framework development, fancy uses for the CLI, reusable control stuff. Lots of great options out there. Love, love, love to see those demos. So please reach out. We've got a form now there, ak.ms/m365pnp/request/demo. And you can always check that out. And please do request a spot. Would love to have you host or demo your stuff on the call. As well, you can contribute on GitHub to any of our projects. You can report issues there, as well as submit pull requests if you have ideas on how to fix things or just new features, new additions to the library. Love to have those as well. And you can always help with issues and questions if you happen to see those from others. And we always appreciate your feedback. How are these calls? How are the documentation needs? And where else can we help? Positive feedback is, of course, okay too, because if you like something we're doing, perhaps we can keep doing a little bit more of it. Here are lots of links to things. Our first set of links there is the Microsoft 365 developer videos. These are topic-based videos around developer scenarios, so maybe making a web part, maybe something around authentication, but a great place to get started if you're trying to learn how to do things with Microsoft 365 development. As well, we have our community videos. Those community videos are going to be the recordings of all of our calls, such as this one, our monthly calls, and all the other calls we do across the programs. You will be able to find on our YouTube channel there for the community videos. We also have lots of open source organizations. SharePoint, PnP, Office Dev, and Microsoft Graph are all open and looking for your participation, looking for your ideas, hopefully you don't have lots of issues, but you can, of course, report issues there as well for problems you might find. So please check those out. As well, tons of sample galleries. So Teams, SPFx Power Platform, SPFx extensions, and list formatting are all available. Great place to start if you have questions on just exactly how to solve a certain problem, or maybe you want to see how others might have approached a project you have. Great place to start. It's something I always check out. Those are a lot of links to remember, so I always like to just remember ak.ms/m365pnp. That'll get you updates around the entire Patterns and Practices program, as well as links to all of these other things, links to the various community calls, and lots of other resources there. So ak.ms/m365pnp. Moving on, our agenda for the upcoming Microsoft 365 platform call is there. It's the 14th of September, and this is a new call trying to group together several other calls into one to make it a little bit easier for folks to attend, a little bit easier to do some planning. So latest engineering news from 365, as well as 3 great demos on that call from Roina. I hope I'm saying that right. Apologies if I'm not. Kathy and somebody named Vesa, who we may have heard from before. We'll be doing some great demos there, and it's a great session. So certainly check that out. There is a new invite for this, so you can get that at ak.ms/m365-call. And so certainly check this out, download that new invite, and make sure you're not missing this. This is a great roll-up of a lot of other calls that used to happen in the community. And now I'll hand things over to David for sharing is caring.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. Well, friends, as we know, we have an inclusive and open source community, which means that we have tons of resources that you're going to see examples of today that you can use and contribute back to, but we understand that there may be some hurdles and blockers in the way of you contributing back. So Sharing is Caring is a program that is here to provide you hands-on guidance and assistance with getting more involved, whether it's your first-time contribution, if you're a non-dev and you want to write some community docs that live at docs.microsoft.com, we can help with that. If you're just starting to get involved with SPFx, we would love to help. We also have a lot of AMAs coming up, script samples, Power Platform, list formatting. These are great opportunities to collaborate with those maintainers within the PnP program. So take advantage of all these safe space opportunities. We don't record the calls, so it's a great opportunity to collaborate without the fear of asking a question that you think maybe someone else should know. All questions are great. We all started somewhere. So we ask you to please register, aka.ms/sharing is caring. We'd love to see you soon. Once you have started contributing, we'd love to celebrate all of the contributions you're doing. So the PnP Recognition Program is a new program that's here to formally celebrate and thank you for all the hard work that you put into this community. We are partnering with Credly, the same Credly that handles all the certification badges, to provide a number of badges that are going to be available to you soon, and some available now. So please, we need you to register and opt in for this, aka.ms/M365 PnP-recognition, and we will get you taken care of. Again, there's going to be a lot of campaigns coming soon. I've been working on some new designs, a lot more opportunities with things like the independent publisher connectors, SPFx samples, community docs, blog articles if you've been assisted by Louisa. So many great things coming up. We want to celebrate you, so please opt in, and we look forward to celebrating all your hard work. Patrick, back to you.
Thanks, David, for those updates. We'll move right on to SharePoint Framework updates with Vesa.
So there's a new version of SharePoint Framework 1.13, public preview available. That was released yesterday or today, depending on which side of the globe you are based on. And one of the new things in this one is a completely new default template. So basically, this is also there to demonstrate easily how to do theming in the teams and theming in the SharePoint and background section colors and all of that as a starting point. Of course, if you're experienced SharePoint Framework developer, you'll do the same as with the existing default template, which is coming out from the Yeoman generator, is that you delete everything and start from there. But it's basically there for the people to easily catch on how to do the basic setup and make the web parts and experience look optimal. So the SharePoint Framework 1.13, the latest version is out, like said, the beta for that one. There will be a GA version coming out on that one within upcoming weeks. I think that's fair to say, which is then aligned together with Microsoft Viva public preview. So that's happening also relatively soon. So we're kind of pushing out then capabilities for Microsoft Viva, and of course, we are evolving the Microsoft Teams and SharePoint experiences as well. But I think that pretty much sums up the latest changes on the SPFx side. So let's jump back to you, Patrick.
Thanks for that, Vesa. We'll now move over to PnPjs updates with Julie.
Thanks, Patrick. So we have the 2.9 release scheduled for September 10th. We do have a new graph feature for advanced querying, and so we'll look to get that implemented in. But other than that, it's pretty quiet right now as we focus all of our energies and attention on V3, which is coming along quite well. Again, we have that V3 branch. So if you're interested in checking that out and seeing what we've been up to, you can go check out the V3 branch. There is also a pinned issue number 1636, which is our overview of our plans for V3. So absolutely check that out and give us any feedback that you see so far. Hopefully you're excited about it as we are. Also, for anyone wanting to, please follow us on Twitter at M365PnPjs. We announce all of our new releases there and keep you up to date that way. So absolutely the way to keep up to date with us. And so that is all I have for today. And back to you, Patrick.
Thanks for that, Julie. CLI for Microsoft 365. New preview V4 with some breaking changes, retrieving SharePoint group members, change default options to JSON, default output to JSON, remove the value wrapper and output in some commands, remove duplicate ID and SPO list item commands, and remove some obsolete file path options. Definitely check out that preview. The V4 with the breaking changes is going to ship GA, so to speak, at the end of September, but you can always try that now. npm install-g at pnp/cli-microsoft365 next. So check that out. Great tool to have in your toolbox. Great resource to have as you're developing, setting up your environments. Certainly encourage you to check that out. Now, the reusable components, there are two sets of reusable components, 2.9 or the 2.x branch. That's supporting SPFx 1.11 and below, and the 3.x branch is SPFx 1.12 and above. Same for the property controls, has that same break there. And these are the last major releases for that V2 branch. So we are encouraging folks, as you can, to update your solutions to SPFx 1.12 or above, and then the version 3 of the controls, which is where new development and new work will be headed. So check that out. Check out the controls if you haven't. Great resource again to get your solutions going quickly. And certainly as you have time, start to update your solutions to the latest versions of SPFx so you can get all the goodness from the V3 branch of the controls. And with that, we move over to modern search, and we've got ak.ms/PnP search for all the details there. September release next week, mostly minor improvements will come out there, but minor improvements are always important as well. So the V4 3 is the July release, so I'm hoping V4 4 will be the September release, but I'm not sure. And so you can check that out. We got Dutch translation support, proper fix for custom helpers, as well as a persona card fix. The V3 branch is still available, but is really in maintenance mode. So again, this is a place where, as you have time, as you're able, we encourage you to please update to the V4 branch of the modern search experience. That will really help you out and make sure you're getting all the latest features and enhancements for your solution. Next up is SPFx samples with Hugo.
Thank you, Patrick. So if you're getting started with using SPFx or you're a longtime SPFx user, there's tons of samples available for you. They include web parts and extensions across 2 repositories, and they can vary from a full-on fledged solution to a very simple concept that you might want to learn. So we invite you to always go take a look at these samples, these repos, but we have 2 new samples over the last 2 weeks. I know it's kind of a quiet couple weeks because of everyone being on vacation, but the first one is Share to Teams by Kunj Sangani. I kind of mentioned it last call. It's a new SPFx extension that makes it easy for you to share items in a list and a document to teams. On the web part side, we have a new web part from Anup Tati, which is an at-a-glance web part, which is based on the BBC website that shows you, the news at a glance. So he actually grabs the latest news from a site and actually shows you those news at a glance. I'd like to thank everyone for, and we have, sorry, I forgot about this new thing. We have a new repository for adaptive card extensions as well. So SPFx ACEs. So if you have samples for adaptive cards and you want to get started, bring it on. We love the contributions from everyone. Thank you, everybody. Back to you, Patrick.
All right, thanks for that. Now we'll move over to the optional picture time.
Sorry, there seems to be a regression here. Hopefully the bug gets resolved soon. So sorry for that. Let's get back on the demo section.
So we are now moving over to the demos. Fabio, if you are ready to go.
Yeah, just a moment. Welcome to my very quick session about my sample on how to use the Hyperscript Tagged Markup templating inside the web part. First of all, some words about me. I'm Microsoft MVP in Office Development and Business Application category, and I'm working as a senior consultant and trainer on Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. So you can find some information like my email, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the GitHub account. So we can start on thinking about how to develop the UI for a web part. So there are 2 ways to approach when you want to create the UI for a web part. The first one is create the UI during the development, of course, by using SharePoint Framework and TypeScript. You are able to use React or another frameworks using Fluent UI or another UI framework. The second way is to use a template system, for example, handlebars. And then your web part have to read the data from graph from SharePoint, and then pass this data to the template system and evaluate it at runtime. In this case, when you want to use a template and evaluate a runtime, we need to, for example, by using the handlebars, we need to understand something. If we take an example, the PnP modern search web part, this web part use handlebar syntax, some helpers, and then use HTML and CSS to build the UI. Of course, if you want to use some complex controls, we can use some web components provided by the solution, and of course the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components. Basically, the Graph Toolkit component are the web components, and the same web components that we have inside the modern search web part, it's built as a wrapper around some Fluent UI React component. This is just on a slide to explain better this concept. In the modern search web part, you can select the custom layout, and then you are able to edit the handlebars template by write your HTML using handlebars functions, using the graph toolkit or some web components. In this case, the document card, it's a web component built on top of the Fluent UI React document card component. And in this case, it's the only way if you want to use React inside handlebars, because handlebars are not able to understand React. And then the only way is to generate web components and then render as a standard web components inside your HTML handlebars template. So what is the pros and cons of the two approaches? So create UI during development or use the template and evaluate runtime. Of course, if you created the UI during development, you have maximum freedom of which framework you want to use. You have the great flexibility on implement complex UI because you write code and you are able to do anything. Excellent development and testability, but of course, you are not able to modify the UI without having to recompile the web part. If you use the template and evaluate runtime, you have maximum freedom on customize the UI without recompile, but you have, I think, a poor UI testability. And of course, you are not able to use all the framework that you want without tricks. For example, using Fluent UI React without write some wrapper using web components or something like that. But this is my sample. I created this web part by using a different template system called Hyperscript Tagged Markup. Basically, it's on a template system. Later, I'll show you some syntax that use the tagged string of the JavaScript that you can find in all modern browser. And inside this template system, you can use directly the React component, for example, the Fluent UI component, but you are able to use any React components if you want, without wrap anything. This is very interesting. Basically, this so the template that you have to create, basically it's on a piece of JavaScript code, and this code it's evaluated through the function constructor. So inside this slide, you can find some line of code. The first line, it's the line that uses the function constructor by passing the string that contain the template that we want to evaluate. And the second piece of code, it's the execute eval function. So the function, the arrow function that use the constructor function that we have defined and call it by passing the function context. The function context is just a JavaScript object that contains all the data and all the function that we want to pass to our template. And the last part of the code, it's the way to render as a React control our template by using the HTML. So HTML is the object that implements the Hyperscript Tagged Markup. And then this is the simple syntax. Later I show you an example on how to render the execute eval function. That it's the object that it's returned from our template, and then by using React DOM render directly this component to the DOM element. The context object of course, contains some fields. We have the reference to the HTML. So HTML is the reference to the HTML engine, the reference to React, the reference to the theme object, the reference to the theme variant. If you use the web part inside on a section and you want to change the variant background to this section, you have inside the context the object that represents the theme variant. And then another three objects. The FUI, it's the reference to the Fluent UI object, the namespace that contains all the controls of the Fluent UI, the Fluent UI hooks that are useful inside your template, and just for this sample, an object that contains the Fluent UI sample data. I use this one to have simple data to show how to use this template inside the web part. So before the demo, I want to show you some information about the Hyperscript Tagged Markup. So this template system, it's on a JS6-like syntax in plain JavaScript. So you are able to develop application directly inside the browser by using React or Preact. It's used the standard JavaScript tagged template that are available in all modern browsers, and it's very light in terms of dimension of the library. So this is a basic introduction to the syntax. You can use the spread prop by write as a string the HTML tag and then write, for example, $props to pass more than one property. If you want to use the React component, you have to write something like dollars and the name of the components to pass the instance of the components inside the tagged template string. But the good thing is that you don't need to transpile nothing, because by using this technique, you are able to use directly in a HTML-like syntax all the React controls that you want to use. There are more improvements are, for example, the possibility to use multiple root, so fragments without problem, use the comments, and close the tag by using //. If you want to understand more information about this template, you can find here the link of the GitHub repo. It's very interesting library. So now I want to show you my demo. This is the sample that you can find inside the PnP web part sample library. So basically, it's on a simple web part, and it's you are able to see that if I click on the button, the value here it's incremented. Okay, and let me show you the property of the web part. So if you click on the edit, you can find some information. So the information on how to use the context object inside the template, the possibility to load the Fluent UI sample data, and of course, if you want to use the Fluent UI, load the Fluent UI library components. But the good thing is here, you are able to click and then edit directly the HTML template. So basically, I want to show you here. The only thing that you have to do is the return the HTML object, and this is the syntax. In this case, I create this object in the theme provider by passing the theme variant, and then I create a stack panel, and then I create a label, and a primary button, and a list that have some items and an on render cell. So this part. Of course, I'm able to write some JavaScript. It's not TypeScript, but it's JavaScript to define the on-render cell, and of course, to define some class names and some items that you want to use directly inside your template. So by using the React hook, we are able to use the state, and then we have the count and set count. And this is the reason why if I click on the button, on click, I'm able to invoke the set count and increment the count inside the state, and then render inside the label. This is very powerful, but what about the testability? So the good thing is if I write here debugger, I don't remember, debugger. Okay. Then click on save. If I open the, sorry, I need to check again. Okay, save and then apply. I'm able to debug inside the developer tools the code, and then we are able to check all the React components, or for example, original items. We are able to see all the objects that we pass inside this Fluent UI list component. This is very, very powerful. Okay, republish. And just I want to mark this one. All these controls are not web components. It's just React components that come from the Fluent UI. And you are able to see here the source code of the web part that basically take the template from the property of the web part and then create the function context by passing some object like, again, React, team variant, Fluent UI, hooks, sample data. And then by using the function constructor, we are able to invoke this new function by passing this object and then render the component and then render again inside the DOM element this template. So I'm finished. Thank you. And that's all.
Awesome. Super cool stuff there. Really excited to see that. I think next up is going to be Andrew Connell with Modernize Your SPFx Projects.
I am here. Let me grab my slides. So I got a few slides I want to run through real quick just to kind of answer the what and the why, and then I'll do a demo of all three of the things I want to show you and the demo at the very end. All right, so first, it's all about modernizing your SharePoint Framework project. Just really quick, I'm Andrew Connell. Got a podcast, also have a SharePoint Framework course, and I'm the one person that likes the first 3 Star Wars episodes. So the couple things I want to cover today is all about how to modernize your SharePoint Framework project. Now, I want to start with talking a little bit about TSLint and ESLint. Let's look at a little bit of a history on why this is. Well, back in January of 2019, the TypeScript team published a roadmap post that effectively said we're done with doing things that, or our mission going forward is not about making TypeScript the greatest language in the world. The idea here is about making TypeScript to improve the ECMAScript experience. So they wanted to focus on not going off and doing their own thing and kind of forking off ECMAScript. They wanted to focus on making it a better experience. And in doing so, they essentially were saying, we don't want to make TypeScript something special. We simply just want to make it special sauce on top of ECMAScript. Well, very soon after that, about a month after that, the team that's in charge of a tool called TSLint, which is a linter that checks your code and for different code rules and stuff like that, they looked at it and they said, you know what, pretty much same thing. We're done maintaining this TSLint project. This doesn't make sense. We should be pouring all of our efforts into ESLint and instead just create special plugins for ESLint that know how to read TypeScript versus reading just JavaScript. So they ditched it as well. Notice the dates on these, though. That was in February of 2019. Well, unfortunately, 2.5 years later, we are still using TSLint with SPFx projects. So even though this has been deprecated by Microsoft and from the TypeScript team, but also from the team that does TSLint, they've deprecated this TSLint tool for over 2.5 years. And it can even result in some random stuff that you get every once in a while. I showed an error that I got just recently working on a SharePoint Framework project right here where it talks about can't find a custom rule directory. Strangely enough, that's actually been one of my most popular blog posts in the last year that I posted a couple weeks ago about that. The problem, though, is that SharePoint Framework projects, they can take a while to catch up to some of the more modern practices. We all remember how long it took us to get off of Node 10 and up to Node 12 or 14. We all know how long we were stuck on Webpack 3. But I'm going to show you how you can take your SharePoint Framework project today that's using TSLint and how you can switch it over to ESLint part, I'm going to show you how to do it manually, and then I'm going to show you how to do it a very easy way of like as close to a one-click install as possible. The other thing I'm going to talk about is IE11. So like other stuff that we're all familiar with, you know, there's been this thing going around the world that all of us hate. It's been a scrounge on all of us. A lot of us have been affected by it. And it's something that obviously the world just can't shake. And of course, I am talking about Internet Explorer 11. So I'm going to show you how you can get rid of IE11 support once and for all in your project. Now, why do you even care about that? Well, first of all, Microsoft 365 apps, they don't support IE11 anymore. As of the middle of August, Microsoft has dropped IE11 from the list of their supported browsers for all Microsoft 365 apps. So even if you build something in today, a SharePoint Framework project today, and your customer says, we're in SharePoint Online, but we still have a corporate standard of IE11. I mean, that's like the equivalent of them saying we have a corporate standard of using Betamax. No one cares, right? That's great. Microsoft isn't going to support you. So if there's a problem with IE11 with your web part, they're probably going to have a problem with SharePoint as well, SharePoint Online as well, and that's not really your problem anymore. The challenge that we have, though, is kind of like the last one, is that SharePoint Framework projects, they still transpile all of our TypeScript down to ECMAScript 5 or ES5. You can translate that. That ECMAScript 5 is actually JavaScript 2009, which, I mean, that's something that we all used. I mean, that's back when my hair wasn't gray. So we don't want to do that anymore. In addition to that is that ECMAScript 5, by SharePoint projects transpiling our TypeScript down to ES5, it's adding a lot of extra code, a lot of polyfills just to account for a missing language feature. So I'm going to show you how you can also update your SharePoint Framework projects today to tell TypeScript to not build for something that's 12 years old. But there also is a couple little things that you're going to needing to fix as well. Now, I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff here in the demos, but if I can find it really quick, I'm going to drop something in the chat. There we go. So I'm going to walk through something that I've actually blogged about 3 different things. So if you miss what I'm doing, I've been going too quick through this. So let me switch over and show you VS Code. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you first about ESLint. But again, just sit back and enjoy the ride for what I'm going to show you real quick. The links that I just posted, they're going to walk you through all 3 things I'm going to show you here. So let's say you've got a base SharePoint Framework project and you want to get rid of TSLint and swap it over for ESLint. What are the steps you need to do? Well, the first you're going to have to do is install a handful of packages. I'm installing ESLint right here. I'm installing 2 ESLint TypeScript packages that are there to let ESLint know how to parse TypeScript files. And then there's also a gulp task. Now, one little footnote here is that you see where I'm using ESLint version 7. You're not really using version 7 because unfortunately there's dependencies deep nested in the SharePoint Framework dependency tree that force us to use ESLint 6, and we can't override that. If you want to, you have to install ESLint globally, blah, blah, blah. That's beyond the scope of what we're going to cover here, but just to let you know that that's what's going on. There's file that away. When you're using ESLint, though, you need to create a config file, kind of like how TSLint has a config file. So I've got a config file that I've listed right here. This config file is telling it to use the TypeScript ESLint parser. I'm telling it the different options that I'm interested in, what plugins I'm interested in, and then this extends piece is where I can say what rules do I want to use. So I'm using all the out-of-the-box ESLint rules that are recommended, as well as all the ones that we have for ESLint rules that are recommended by the TypeScript team, and then just in general, also some other recommended ones. I'm going to come back to this in the second part of my demo in just a minute here, because one thing you're noticing is that you don't see any SharePoint Framework defined rules. If you remember in a base SharePoint Framework project, we've got a bunch of base TSLint rules here that you see that's in that TSLint JSON file in the base of your project. Okay, so I've got TSLint installed. I've got a configuration file set up for it as well. So the next thing I need to do is I need to run the task. Well, the problem is I don't have a task in here. So in a default gulp file that we have in a SharePoint Framework project, what you're going to do is you're going to find this line that's already there, and you're going to add some awesome sauce to it. You are first going to tell the SharePoint Framework to stop using TSLint, that 2.5-year-old thing that you don't want to touch anymore. And instead, what you're going to do is create a custom task. And what this custom task does is it's going to take all of your TypeScript and TypeScript extended files. It's going to pipe those into ESLint using your configuration file. And if you've got any problems, you're just going to bail out and create this new task for this. And what that allows you to do then is when you then come into your project, which is like this, I can then say gulp tasks, And you can now see that the TSLint project or task, it was never there. It was kind of invisible to us, but an ESLint task is now there. And we're just waiting for Gulp to show up. I have to keep talking so you don't think I disconnect. I had actually just killed my Wi-Fi and gone to hardline right before the last demo, like lost the connection a second ago. And I was like, did I just do that? Did I just kick myself out? There we go. All right, so I'm not going to run this because you can see that it's there. But what it's done is that when I run a Gulp build, it will run ESLint before it runs Gulp build. Hey, that's all fine and good, and now I've got ESLint working on my project, but that's a lot of extra steps I have to do. So what I've done is I've actually done something else to make your life a little bit easier. In the second project, what I've done is I've created this little, I call it a preset, kind of following the preset concept that we have with Jest and testing React-based projects. I've created an ESLint preset for SharePoint Framework. And what this is going to do is it installs all those dependencies that you're going to need, like the TypeScript plugin and ESLint and all that, and the Gulp file as well. It does all of that stuff. When you run it, it also goes into your Gulp file and it adds in the stuff that you need for creating the ESLint task. As you see here, I've actually got it baked into my preset, so it's a lot easier to go through and to include it as a task inside of your SharePoint Framework project. But the other cool thing about this is if you come over here and you look at the config file, what you see in this ESLint file, now in this config file, there's a lot of stuff that's in here, a lot more stuff that I've added. And the documentation, all this red stuff kind of explains a little bit. There's a little bit of an issue between ESLint version 6 and version 7. Version 6 doesn't like this schema thing in here, so you don't get IntelliSense. So I have to uncomment that if I want to get IntelliSense with the different options I can do in the config. But when I go to build it, ESLint 6 is going to throw an error saying it doesn't understand what that thing is. Furthermore, if you're using ESLint 6, it doesn't support the version of TypeScript that the SharePoint Framework projects support today. It works just fine, and ESLint 7 supports it just fine. But if you don't want that warning to show up, you can say warn unsupported TypeScript version. No, I don't want it. Don't warn me about anything. I know what I'm doing. Furthermore, what if you're the kind of developer that likes all of those rules that the SharePoint Framework team puts on us? Personally, I don't like that. I like to let developers choose what they want. And I like spaces. I like 2 spaces. I'm not one of those strange people that likes tabs or 4 spaces and likes to indent stuff way off the screen. So I don't like generally, I don't like that TSLint JSON file that the SharePoint Framework projects have. But if you do like it, what I've done is I've created a special set of rules here. And if I just add a comment there, so I uncomment this line and I go through and I added a comment up here, then you will see that my preset also adds in all of the equivalent rules for ESLint that we have as TSLint rules on a default SharePoint Framework project. So if you want to look just like the way the Microsoft guys want your project to look, but you want to use TSLint, I got you set up here. It's just one extra step. You got to uncomment that line if you want to do it. If you don't like it and you think that should be the default, well, PRs are always welcome. They're not always accepted, but at least they're welcome, and you can actually submit it to my preset project, and we'll take a look at it. The other thing that I wanted to show you is about how to kill IE11 once and for all, and hopefully we can get past this phase of our life that we're all dealing with in the last couple of years. The way you're going to do that, this is actually very simple, is if you come over here and you look at your TSLint, tsconfig file, the only change you have to do to make this change is right here on this target. And what you want to do is you want to change this target to a different value. Now, let me show you something first. If you come over here, and I've done a normal build of a SharePoint Framework project already, and I look at the bundle that was actually created here, you see all of this extra garbage up here at the top. And then you see there's a bunch of extra garbage all in here that is not really necessary. So take my word for it, that's 3.0K. So it's 3K in size. I have another little demo where I'd show you how to calculate math using the console, but we're not going to do that because I want to make sure that the other demo has time. If I come over here and I make this, go back to my TSLint config file, and I change this to use a more recent version of ECMAScript, I can choose a bunch of different options here. I like to choose ESNext, and what that says is just use the most current version of JavaScript. That's a safe one to use because now that IE11's gone, the only browsers that are out there are evergreen browsers, so we should be in good shape now. We're going to make that one change. The other change you're going to probably want to do is you're probably going to want to come to this lib section and you want to tell the TypeScript compiler, hey, here's other things you want to import that you want to assume are there. Like, for example, if I ran this on the default SharePoint Framework project right now, it'd work great. But if you use something like the spread operator, well, ECMAScript 5 didn't understand what the spread operator was. So you can change the library that you import to something else, like ECMAScript 6 or ESNext or whatever. So I'll just say, I'll put that as ES6. I'll then come over here. We'll do let's jump out of this demo into our IE11 die demo. I'll do a gulp build. Hopefully this runs slightly faster than the last time I ran gulp. Here, I can just show you while we're waiting. Let's open up let me open another console real quick. Come on. Let's do a list, everything in the, what was that? The IE11 demo that was in lib, that was in web parts. Let's see if it's still there. Hello world, and let's go to that JavaScript file. And we can see that it's already finished the build. Okay, so it doesn't matter. So the build finished. The build is now 1.9K. So what you notice here by compiling it to using a newer version of JavaScript, if I come over here and look at the bundle, notice all that junk that we had at the top is gone. This actually looks like the same class that you wrote in your web part project because TypeScript is very close to the modern version of JavaScript. So we got rid of all the extra junk at the top. We got rid of that extra junk after all those import statements. And our bundle has now gone from 3K down to 1.9K. That means you just chopped off about 40% on the size of your bundle. It's a debug build. It's not minified, blah, blah, blah. But still, it's better. So that way we can move on in the world. That's everything that I wanted to show you guys in this demo. Again, the samples there's some blog posts that do show you, walk you through each of these different 3 things that I showed you if you were interested in looking at more stuff or learning how to do this in your own projects. And I will now pass it back to Yannick.
Thank you, Andrew. So, hi, folks. Sorry for being late. I promise I will learn to read clock next time. So I created a web part, and basically I want to show this web part in this demo. But the reason why I built this is because it doesn't exist out of the box. It was a returning customer requirement. I could use it internally, and because I can, because I'm a developer and I just like to build stuff. And the requirements for my web part, which is an advanced image library, web part was to connect to any SharePoint document or picture library. It has to use folders to group pictures of an event. It had to have support for subfolders. I wanted a breadcrumb to navigate, and I wanted the image browsing to happen in Lightbox style. When I built this, a pleasant surprise was that it also works in the SharePoint mobile app through Viva Desktop in Teams, and that people actually loved how it looked and feel, because I'm a developer and I don't really do styling. And the ease of use for this image library was a pleasant surprise as well. So it was a great success to get this web part ready. So first of all, let me demo it before we dive into some code. Oh, my editing session has ended. So let me refresh this page, make it bigger, go to edit. And here I can add my web part. So it's the Lightbox image gallery web part. And it uses a lot of PnP available controls. So it uses SPFx React controls made available in PnP. I love this pre-run experience to show off all of the, that the web part has not been configured yet. So I go to configure my web part, and the only thing that you have to configure is select the document library or picture library in your SharePoint site collection that you want to use to render your data. I will pick fun because I have lots of fun photos available. And you can see here that it renders immediately all of the folders that are available in my document library. Another thing that I want to show off, by default, it has the web part title available, and I use another control from the same React controls library in PnP to just inline edit this to get kind of the same thing as the out-of-the-box web parts, and then I will publish the page. Like this, so it still renders. That's nice. And then we can dive into all of these folders. Like every folder, like I said, contains images for a specific event or something, because I use this web part on my intranet to show off all of the corporate events that we do. So if I dive into one, you see that it quickly renders all of the thumbnails of the images inside that folder, and it also lists all subfolders in that folder into on top of the images. So if we go deeper, you see that the breadcrumb updates, and we can move up or move down again. And it also lists the number of images inside the folder. So you see here that it renders all the thumbnails, and if you click one of the images, it opens a lightbox style gallery with all of the images, which you can browse through also using the keyboard. You can go full screen, zoom in, download, and everything. So it's from the look and feel or usability point of view, not too complex a web part, but it has a lot of use cases on an intranet or on a SharePoint site. So this is about it from the demo. So let's switch back to the slides. First of all, my code structure, because it's always nice to see how someone else structures his or her code. So I work with models, where I put my models or my interfaces in a folder. So I've got my iData service here and my iFolder data. I've got my services, the data service and the mock data service, who implement iData service on top. So my data service is the class that does everything. It interacts, it fetches all the data from SharePoint. First of all, fetching all of the lists in my site collection. Second, fetching the data of a folder in that list. Mock data service is one that I use when running my report locally and not running inside a site collection or inside SharePoint online. Then within WebPart, there's my images gallery WebPart itself. And I tend to group all my components that I use in my WebPart inside a components folder in that WebPart. If these components are used across multiple WebParts, I promote them to a components folder right under source. So this is my code structure. And then there are some code snippets that might be interesting, because this web part is pretty simple in terms of code. So with simple code, you can still get a lot of value. So there's not much of code that I can show you. First of all, there's data service. It does the get lists, and it uses PnP JS to select all the lists inside your SharePoint site. So I get all my lists, I get title, base template, and root folder. I expand the root folder because I need some properties that are on root folder, and I fetch everything. And then I go filter on base template 109, which is picture library, or 101, which is document library. And all of those I return, and that's what's used in the property pane of my web part. And then there's get folder data. So every time a folder is opened, and remember, the root of a document library is also a folder and has a folder unique ID. I use the folder's unique ID to fetch data from SharePoint for that specific folder. So we use that folder unique ID to get the folder and get folder info. We use the folder itself to get all of the subfolders for that folder, and we use the folder to get all the files from the folder. And then we return that as an iFolder data. So basically, this tells me the name of the folder, the path of the folder, and the number of images in the folder. It gives me all of the subfolders and their IDs, and all of the files in this specific folder, so I can render them on screen. So with get subfolders, which is one of my own, I just use, once again, PnP JS to get all of the data. And I filter specifically on, is WOPI enabled to be false, which filters out all of the out-of-the-box hidden folders from SharePoint, and only those where there is more, well, where there is at least one file inside of that folder. And then the last one is get files from folder, so I fetch all of the files. Now, this is a specific one because I couldn't figure out the camel query. I'm sure there is one. So after I get all the files, I filter them to be of an image type to render them on the screen. Last one that I want to show off is once again, the SharePoint property pane things that PnP makes available. because you can do load property pane resources, which is an SPFx out-of-the-box available method, to fetch all of my lists. So this goes to data service. Now, because this is asyncing and take a little while, I use something from PnP to set a spinner on screen. And then when this is loaded, afterwards I clear the spinner. And then this is the most complex line of code inside this web part. It's to fetch or to get a thumbnail path. Because if you fetch an image from a document library, you only get the full image URL. And to render a thumbnail or a small version, to make it load quicker, I really like to get a preview version of that image. So what I do is I take the full screen URL, I do an encode URI component on it, and then I once again replace the %2f with the / again. It's because that's what's needed for this format to work. And then I create a thumbnail path by taking the root URL of my site collection, replace the ending with nothing. So I can the ending / or trim off the end /. And then I do layouts 15 get preview ASHX, and I pass in the image path. And this gives me a thumbnail path that I can use in my Lightbox gallery item. So this makes my image load very quickly on screen. And that's about it. I've got some resources available in the slides. So I'm using PnP JS, SPFx controls React, and an available React Lite gallery. All of this is on my GitHub, and I have a blog post explaining it again. But in essence, I wanted to show that with little code and using a lot of stuff from PnP, you can get a great result in the end. Back to Patrick.
Thanks, Yannick. Great stuff there. Really excited to see that demo and as well the others. So thanks to Yannick, Fabio, and Andrew for the demos today. Very much appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for joining us here on the call today. So recording will be available in about 24 hours on the YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter there. Our next SPFX call will be in 2 weeks on September 23rd. The next general dev call will be next Thursday, September 16th. Hope to see you all there. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Later.